Hello and welcome along to another episode of My Football Story from the Honest Football Podcast. Each week we interview someone involved in a professional game, either past or present, and talk to them about their footballing career and their life in the sport. And this time we've got another professional footballer. That man is Ben Pringle, who most recently played for Gillingham last season. We talked to him about his early career and moving into the West Brom Youth Academy before being released and rebuilding his career in non-league, most notably with Ilkeston Town. We then talk about a return to the professional game and a step up 8 divisions to play for Derby in the Championship and immediately breaking through and making an impact there. We talk about the effect loan spells have had on his career, as well as his main stint at Rotherham and being involved in a dressing room with back-to-back promotions under Steve Evans at the time, before another big move to a Fulham side looking to get back in the Premier League, and how things perhaps went a bit wrong off the pitch there. We then talk about his time at Preston and loan spells, including a notable one at Tranmere, which ended in the 3rd promotion of his career at Wembley, making him a cult hero with the Super White Army, before this last season at Gillingham being reunited with Steve Evans, and his hope for his next move after being released in the summer. At 31, Ben's got a wealth of experience in the semi-professional and professional game, a really good pro and great to talk to, and we hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please put a thumbs up on the video and subscribe down below for more content from the Honest Football Podcast, including 2 interviews awake from this series, weekly championship predictions, topical podcasts and much, much more. But this is Ben Pringle's football story, and we hope you enjoy it. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Ben now, and I'll start, as I always do in these interviews, by asking you for your earliest football memory, be it watching on TV, playing in the back garden, whatever it is. What's the first thing you remember about the game?
I was a massive Newcastle fan when I was a kid, so I think definitely watching them as I grew up, getting the strips. I remember the goalkeeping strip. I think the bright orange one. I used to have that for some reason, but. Yeah, I think those are my earliest memories, kind of collecting the Newcastle kits and supporting them, really.
And then what about the playing side of the game? It doesn't have to be competitive. What were the first memories of playing for you?
Just in the garden, really. I'm guessing like everybody else who, plays football from a young age, you spend hours out there. So yeah, I had a goal net in the garden that I had. And like I say, we'd just kind of stay out there for hours, just kicking the ball into the net, off the wall, whatever.
And then the final first will be the first time you went to a stadium to watch a game. Do you remember the game? Do you remember the occasion? What was it like for you?
The first game I ever went to was at Bristol City when Newcastle played them away in the Cup. I can't remember what the score was. But yeah, obviously it was to watch Newcastle. So
let's talk about you getting into playing, because obviously from the North East, it's a bit of a unique situation because the North East probably has the most ferocious football support in the country, but probably the smallest number of professional clubs for the size of the area. So how did you get into your early days playing competitive football, even before you joined West Brom?
Well, I didn't move back to Newcastle till I was about 11 or 12. Yeah. So we lived down south in Bristol and then in Leeds. So I just kind of played for the Sunday League teams there. And then, yeah, kind of when we moved back to Newcastle, I was about 11 or 12. That's kind of when I started playing seriously as such on a Sunday when I signed for West Brom, for Wallsend Boys Club. Sorry.
And then how was that sort of experience for you? Because most people talk about their early days in youth football and then days in non-league as their favourite days as a football player, even despite the big memories that football supporters talk about. So what was it like for you in the early days playing competitively before all of the hype?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. Like I say, you were playing obviously seriously on a Sunday because it was for a good Sunday League side. But for me, it was always kind of, Sunday League versus academy football. I knew lads that were going into academies at 12, 13, 14, 15, and it gets very serious, very young. So, and I know that kind of happens today, that kind of, which one would you rather? So from my point of view, it was always enjoyable playing on a Sunday with my mates, but obviously it was still serious as well.
And then talk to me about going from playing locally, playing with mates, albeit at a good level, to then moving into a football academy. Because obviously, as you say, it was a little bit later for you. And obviously it was a long way away from where you were living at the time. So how did that move come about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it started getting serious at about 15, 16 when you get offered the YT contract. And, from my point of view, it was just kind of getting that first contract offered.
Yeah.
So I'd had a few trials and me and my dad just kind of said, whatever comes first, we'll we'll go with. I came close to signing for Celtic, but they weren't as quick as West Brom for whatever reason. So we played West Brom's youth team in a game on a weekend for Cramlington Juniors, the Sunday League side that I was playing for then. And then, yeah, we played them once, and then we went down for a trial, about a week's trial. And then kind of after that, we'd obviously done enough to sign for West Brom.
And talk to me about playing for West Brom in the youth team. And obviously it depends on the generation, the answer to this question. But as a youngster there, how many of the dirty apprentice jobs did you have to do?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was tough at the beginning, like you say, moving away from home.
Yeah.
It was a long way away. I didn't have a car. Mobile phones were kind of not the best back then. So it was a strange time. I was quite homesick for the first 6 months. So, but aside from that, I really enjoyed it. The jobs, yeah, it was like you say, back in the day, it was everything: cleaning boots, picking up cones, laying the pitches out, cleaning the skips out with all the stuff in it, all those kind of jobs that were the norm back then.
And you mentioned something homesickness there, and it's sort of something that struck me about your career more than most is how much you've moved around the country. You've racked up a few miles going between places. When you were making that initial decision for a youth team, I know you said you went for the first offer, but do you have any thought as to how far you'll have to travel, whether you'll be able to stay at home? Does that bear into your decision making?
No, I mean, like I say, it was getting to that point now where I needed to get, an offer from somebody. So, like I say, Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, I'd had trials at those before, and for whatever reason, that was a no. So I kind of knew that whatever was going to happen, I'd be moving away from home. And West Brom had just been promoted back to the Premier League. So I was buzzing at the time, but kind of didn't expect to be that as homesick as I was, really.
And I guess that obviously leads on quite well to the nice thing, because you weren't at West Brom for too long. And this is the main reason we like to speak to players like this and like yourself, is you then went back and started your adult career in non-league, which is something that a fair few guests have had in common. And it's the sort of stage that gets skipped out of most people's careers, but it always ends up being most of their favourite memories. So how was it for you moving back to the Northeast and playing non-league football for the first in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the football side of it. I always remember, because I was actually in Ibiza working with my mates. I was just going to stay there. And I got a phone call off my old youth team manager, and he'd taken over at Ilkeston, and he was just like, "Do you want to come and play?" And it was like, what was it, middle of July, I was in Ibiza thinking, not really, I'm just going to stay here till October, I think. But yeah, my dad persuaded me. He was just kind of like, just do it one more time, one more season, and then see where it takes you. And if it doesn't, then, you just do what's going to make you happy, kind of thing. So the football side, I really enjoyed. Obviously, I was traveling from Newcastle to Ilkeston, which was 4.5 hours, 3 times a week, which is absolutely mental when you think about it now. But yeah, luckily it paid off.
So I guess you mentioned something quite important there, which is travelling long distances. And I mean, the wages in non-league probably aren't going to cover that travel. So obviously money isn't a motivating factor. But how on earth do you cope with travelling 4.5 hours to do 2 hours of training or play a 2-hour game?
I think about it now, and I think, like, what on earth was I doing? Like you say, it doesn't make any kind of sense, really. I was doing a bit of coaching, which would get me a couple of £100 a week, but just off my football money, it wasn't. I was spending it all on petrol, and 9 times out of 10, I was getting booked as well in the Northern League games, which was 10, 20 quid as well. So I was literally coming out with nothing and travelling probably 16 hours there and back during a week just to play a game of football. Like, so madness, yeah.
No one can argue with the dedication at that stage.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess after a pretty successful spell there, you quite quickly ended up with a massive move to Derby. So I'm quite interested to know how it came about. Obviously, it's a fairly local game, so I'd imagine scouts would be looking at the local non-league clubs. But how did the move come about, and how was it presented to you? Was it you're going to be going and being involved in the squad? Was it come along as a young player? How did you perceive that move to be?
Initially, it was kind of come as a under-21s. So that's what, the move was about. Obviously, it was 8 leagues jump from Ilkeston to the Championship, which was, again, ridiculous. And obviously, Nigel Clough, he changed my life, like signing me for Derby at the time. But yeah, initially it was just to be a 21s player, kind of a year's contract, kind of see how I got on. you know, if I was good, then see where it takes me. But yeah, no, I was buzzing with the move, obviously.
And I guess that's why it's quite an interesting one to me, talking about coming into the 21s, because you then made your debut right at the start of the season in August and almost immediately broke into the team. So how did you find that, going from playing, as you say, further down the non-league pyramid to then almost instantly being in the first team of a championship squad?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and again, you don't really see it now. Like, thinking about it and, you know, going over what had happened, it's madness. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of went in there thinking, you know, I'm never going to get an opportunity like this again. So just take it with both hands. And from day one, kind of that's what I did in training. Obviously, I was with the 21s. I got promoted to the first team dressing room within 3 weeks. So that was a big bonus as well for me. And then, like you say, making my debut like 6 weeks later, it was surreal, yeah.
And it's a question we always ask of players that have been in a professional game, that emotion when you find out you're going to be in the squad for the first time, and then equally after that, the feeling when you find out you're going to be going on the pitch for the first time. Talk to me through those two experiences and what the overriding emotion was.
Well, obviously surprised to begin with at being in the squad. Like you say, I didn't expect to be anywhere near it. Thinking about it now, it's just strange. But yeah, no, obviously I was buzzing to be in the squad. I didn't think I would come on at all, but I think I came on for the last 12 minutes. I think we ended up winning 2-1, so it was a perfect day, really.
Do you remember the main emotion you had when you were standing on the sideline waiting to come on? Was it fear? Was it excitement? A blend of every emotion under the sun? What was the main one?
Yeah, like you say, everything, adrenaline, you know, you don't want to mess up, you want to impress. But yeah, I think, you know, when there's 35,000 there and you stand on the touchline ready to go on, the adrenaline just kind of takes over, and that, you know, you just go from there. And luckily we managed to win 2-1.
And I guess moving through your time at Derby, obviously you got a new contract to take you into a second season pretty quickly. And were you also captain of a reserve team? Is that right?
Yeah, for the two seasons I was there, yeah.
So how did you find that sort of difference? Because obviously in the first team squad, you're on the periphery as a young player. You're often the one that tries not to upset anyone in the dressing room. And then when you're going into the reserve team dressing room, you're in essence the person that everyone's looking to. How do you find that difference in emotion within the same week?
Yeah, it's strange. And like I say, obviously, Nigel Clough, he signed me. It was obviously 8-league jump. All the rest of it made me captain, gave me my debut. It was kind of like he just liked me for whatever reason, which obviously is great for me. And obviously, I'm really grateful for everything that he did. But yeah, like to be captain of the reserves, like there was first team players who'd racked up however many games, and then there's me who's just made my debut 10 minutes ago, like trying to tell them what to do on the pitch was a bit strange. But yeah, like you say, it was a good experience.
And then in your second year at Derby, I know you had a brief loan at Torquay and then came back. But there's something that I find a bit weird about this stage at Derby, which is you were offered a new deal, but then told you could go, all in the same summer. So I'm just trying to get myself into your head of the emotions and the conversations you must have had over that 1 or 2 months to getting a new deal at Derby to then being told you can go. How did that summer pan out for you?
Yeah, it wasn't great, to be honest. I'd had a few conversations with coming back home, back to Derby, sorry, from Torquay. And the manager just kind of said to me, you can either come back and try and get in the first team squad, but we think you're better kind of suited there and playing games. Obviously, Torquay were in the playoffs, so they got to the League Two playoff final. But in my head, I thought, you know, if Derby are safe and there's a chance for me to be in the squad, I'd much rather come back and play in the Championship squad than in a League Two side. So yeah, obviously I came back and I don't think it kind of went down well. So wasn't the best way to end, really.
And obviously with that came probably some good news, which was a move to Rotherham, which then became probably the biggest, most famed spell of your career, certainly where you've racked up most of your appearances. So how did the move come about to Rotherham? Because I'm assuming as a young player that's done well in the Championship, you'll probably have a few clubs after you. So how do you make your decision at that point?
Well, again, looking back, I'd probably have made, you know, if this was to happen tomorrow, I'd probably make a different decision. Like you say, I had a year left on my contract at Derby and I signed for a League Two side on a 2-year deal on a free transfer. So, you know, if that was someone I knew, I wouldn't like you say, I'd be advising them to, go out on loan for a year or, look a little bit higher, I guess. But yeah, like I say, it came about pretty quickly. My agent just sorted it out, and yeah, like I say, there wasn't really much thinking. It was just a case of going to play games, and that was it really.
Was it something that you thought about that summer in terms of going out on loan and try and stick it out at Derby, or were you immediately thinking, I want to go and play football, I need a new start?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I don't think there was a great deal of thought gone into it, to be honest. Like I say, with a year left at a championship club, I should have been aiming higher or going out on loan. But ultimately, when the chance came, it was kind of playing football every week. That was the bit that kind of, thought, okay, I'll go and do that for a season or two.
Obviously, it turned out to be a bit more than that. After a first season that was probably a little bit in and out of the team. So talk to me about the change from the first season to the second year. And obviously, it will bring us on to a manager you've worked with a few times that has a big reputation before him. But how did you find your first couple of years at Rotherham? Because the first and second were very different.
Yeah, I mean, the first year, as obviously all the Rotherham fans know, was difficult for me. For whatever reason, I just didn't fit. Like, my face didn't fit. And obviously, I've spoken about it loads before in the past. But yeah, it was just one of those things that it didn't work out. I didn't know why. I didn't really get any reason as to why it wasn't, or why I wasn't going to play. And then kind of one day when I went to sign the release papers to leave, the manager just kind of changed his mind and said that he wanted me to play. Obviously, I haven't played in 7 months, so to change his mind overnight was a bit strange. I couldn't believe it. So yeah, that's the first year was a bit crazy, and then second year was really, really good for me personally.
Because obviously the second year for the club as well led to them coming back to Rotherham, playing at home, which obviously will make a huge difference for the fans. But for you as players in the dressing room, we hear this with all sorts of off-the-pitch things. Is it the sort of thing that affects you? Do you talk about it in the dressing room? And does it have a real impact on the game, the 90 minutes when you're playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone was buzzing for the stadium, obviously playing at Don Valley. I don't know if you've ever been there or played there, but it's open and there's not a great deal of atmosphere, which is what you don't want as a player. But as soon as the new stadium was built, there was a buzz around the place, and to be honest, that was the main thing that got me going. It was just kind of playing at that, because it was a new stadium. It was the best stadium in League Two at the time, so that was definitely a big boost to all the players who'd been there before at Don Valley and kind of moved to New York.
And I know we'll talk about how those 2 seasons went in a moment, because it's a pretty remarkable achievement in the footballing pyramid now. But the other question I want to ask you about is obviously that campaign was under Steve Evans. Now, he is someone who a few guests have talked about before, a few guests have worked under, and there have been very different opinions, it's fair to say. Obviously, he has a huge reputation in the media for what he is and who he is. But how did you find working with him? Because a lot of players just value honesty, and that's the one thing most players have said he normally produced. So how did you find it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. There was times back in the day at Rotherham where it was tough. A lot of the lads found it tough, but there was something going on every day. Literally, something different would be happening every single day. And any of the lads who were playing under him at that time will say the same thing. They kind of look back, and at the time, they might have been thinking, this isn't for me. Like, they'll look back and, I laugh about it all the time with the lads who I've played with. But it was just so up and down. But it worked, managed to work well, because obviously we got back-to-back promotions. But yeah, it was certainly an entertaining time.
And talk to me about his assistants as well, because one of the things that a lot of the guests have talked about is the fact that he surrounds himself with the good cop characters to make up for what he does. Is that your experience of it too?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously you can see on the sideline that he's known for kind of getting angry, and Rains is obviously the guy in between. Paul Warne as well, who's obviously the manager at Rotherham now. Them two especially were kind of the link between the gaffer and the players. And I know at the time they must have done so much negotiating for the play on part of the players, to try and change the gaffer's mind or talk him round for, bringing us in at 6 a.m. on a Sunday after a defeat or whatever he used to do. So yeah, definitely the good cop as well.
And then talk to me about the 2 seasons on the pitch, because obviously they were hugely successful for Rotherham with the new stadium. promotion automatically the first time and then playoffs the second year. And we've talked about this after promotion before with guests. How does that momentum work in a dressing room? Because a lot of players talk about just feeling invincible when they get on a run. Was that the same thing you had at Rotherham?
Yeah, it's similar. Obviously, the budget was good for Rotherham in League Two, and it was up there again in League One. So the core of the group in League Two were, we always felt like they were too good for League Two without sounding funny. Like, they were League One players. So, and again, when we came up, the gaffer, made good signings for that league. So, like you say, with the kind of the core of the team stuck together, and we added a few more, it was a good team in League One, that which obviously competed.
What was it like in the dressing room for you? Was the dressing room just buzzing every time? Because there's a lot of players, once you get on a roll, particularly if you've been involved in both the promotions. I mean, we've had it with Luton recently. Is that something that you can sense almost when you're in and around the ground and the squad?
Not really, no. I mean, normally it would be, but as I say, there were tough days with Steve Evans as the manager. So more days than not, it wasn't all rosy every day going into training thinking we're top of the league or whatever. It was, like I say, there was ups and downs, but it was working. That's whatever we had to do running wise or anything extra he wanted us to do, it managed to work. So it was like I say, it was a weird time, but a good time.
Probably one of the most unique answers I've received to a question like that. So
I like to be honest, like you say.
Absolutely. But let's talk about going into the Championship then, because obviously for you, it's probably back to where you thought you were when you were at Derby, where you thought your career was going to be, and you obviously got back there fairly quickly. And I think the first Championship game you played with Rotherham was against Derby then, wasn't it?
Yeah, Derby away, yeah. I still, to this day, think it was a free kick on myself because we got beat 1-0 following that. And Steve Evans wasn't happy after that game. But yeah, we got beat 1-0 on the first day.
How did you find the return to the Championship? Did it have any sort of special memory for you? Was it a special moment, or for you, was it just you're back where you belong at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit strange, obviously going back to Derby, but I'd played a few, like 20 odd games for Derby, so I knew kind of what it was like, but yeah. I definitely felt this standard had got better, over the 2 years that I hadn't been there. So, but yeah, I was obviously buzzing to be back as well.
And talk to me about how the season panned out at Rotherham, because obviously at the end of the year, you did leave the club that first season back in the Championship. And arguably, and I know I'll probably upset some Rotherham fans here, going to, reputation-wise, a bigger club that had spent over a decade in the Premier League. So how did that move come about, and did you sense it coming as the season went on? Yeah,
I mean, we were just kind of, as Rotherham squad, we were just looking to stay in the league. That was the only objective that season, which we managed to do. And as I've spoke about in the past, me and a few others, we didn't get the contract offers from Rotherham until very late in the day. So things could have been different had, they'd moved quickly. But yeah, as the season kind of went on and I knew that I was playing well, obviously we were still down the bottom. I just thought if we can stay in the league, then, something else might pop up.
And obviously it did. And you were then going to a club, as you mentioned, with completely different ambitions. So how did you find, I presume you must have leapt at that chance, but there will have likely been other clubs interested as well. So again, then, as you're going further south, how does the decisions come about? Because you're obviously at a stage there where you do think about settling down and staying in an area.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like I say, there was a few other teams interested, but it was a no-brainer for me. Obviously, it was a massive club. They'd been in the Premier League. Yeah. Everything about the club was there. The training ground, everything was was set. And it, like I say, I was always going to go there. So I was delighted, obviously, when it happened.
And how did you find your spell at Fulham? Because obviously, on paper, it probably perhaps doesn't look like you got the chance that you probably deserved after being signed. And you ended up then going out on loan again. But how did you find it being at Fulham? Do you feel that you got the chance? And how did you feel you did yourself?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I played, I think it was the first 12 games when I signed. And like I say, I probably wasn't playing at my best, managed to score a few goals, but it was a new team. There's obviously a lot of players coming in. I think I did all right. That's what I would say. After that, there was a lot of we had 4 managers in 6 months, which obviously is going to kind of mess up anyone's momentum in the team or whatever. But yeah, it was a strange time after those games that had started.
Well, it's something that you've brought up, which I was going to ask you about, which is after probably a first half of career where you worked generally in modern football terms with clubs that had fairly settled management teams and coaching staff. You've then gone to Fulham and there were managers in and out probably quicker than you could learn a system or the way they wanted to work. How does that affect a dressing room and how does that affect your performance as a player?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, we didn't know who was going to kind of be playing at the time. Obviously, the better players, they would obviously start. But for me, I played the first 12 games. So, and don't get me wrong, we were doing all right. We were 10th, 11th when Kit Simmons got sacked. So it wasn't like we were doing dreadful. But yeah, it's kind of from then it was a bit kind of messy, and the lads didn't know whether they were coming or going, who they were kind of listening to. It was a bit strange, yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned there, which was about a lot of changes to personnel and players in the dressing room. Again, from Rotherham, you had a fairly settled squad as you moved through the league. So how did you find that, seeing completely different faces? And I know probably not so much for you as you were one of the newer ones, but how did you find that, having different players in the squad and coming in every week?
Yeah, it was the whole thing was a bit of a culture shock because obviously I'd been used to playing at Rotherham for 3 seasons in a row. So similar to Derby, I kind of just went in thinking, it's another great opportunity. Just kind of give it all you can, really. But as you know, there's bigger squads. They had more players. The standard of football was better. So, after that initial period of when I played, it was kind of strange not to play, and I think I struggled with that.
And obviously, I wouldn't normally talk about a brief loan spell, but you went to Ipswich for a short spell, which was another big club reputation-wise. Obviously, when I first started watching football, they were a Premier League side as well. So how did you find that and how did you make the decision? Because obviously, as you mentioned earlier in the year, you'd been fairly frequently in the Fulham first 11. Was it just with the new manager that you knew you weren't going to get a chance, perhaps?
Yeah, I think when Slavica Kanovic came in, that was kind of, I knew I wasn't his type of player from the first week that he was in. So that was, December. So it was looking towards January, kind of get out and play games. And I knew like Mick McCarthy had spoke to my agent about it. So, and I think that's their style of play kind of suited me better. So it was obviously worked well. So yeah, I was buzzing to get out and play, like I say, most of the games, managed to score a few goals. We just missed out on the playoffs. So yeah, I was happy with the loan, to be fair.
And obviously it led that summer then to your next permanent move to Preston. And again, racking up a few miles, moving to a completely different area of the country. At what stage did you choose to go to Preston? Because again, there will have been multiple clubs and probably some a lot closer to where you were at the time. So how do you choose? Is it purely footballing based even at that stage?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, about 2 weeks before, I was close to kind of potentially signing for Rangers as well. So that was an option which didn't happen. Obviously, it's a massive club, but it was kind of playing up there versus playing in the Championship for Preston. You just kind of, assess each situation as it comes in terms of teams. So, but yeah, I was buzzing further, like back up north, and buzzing to sign for Preston.
Talk to me about your spell there, because it's probably one of the strangest ones, because you didn't really get much game time at Preston at all, which I'm presuming if at the time of signing you would have expected a bit more than that. And it led to a lot of loan spells, and albeit some of them went really well. How did you find that early spell at Preston? Did it frustrate you at all?
Yeah, of course. It was, it was a tough time. Similar to kind of Rotherham the first season. When I didn't play, I'd played the first few, and then we signed obviously Aidan McGeady, and we had Callum Robinson. So there was good wingers at the club. But I mean, from my point of view, my head kind of, obviously I was going in, I wanted to do well, but I look back now and I think I should have, my attitude could have been different. I could have done things differently. But on the flip side, I had a manager who didn't play me, wouldn't let me go out on loan, and didn't give me a reason why he wouldn't do any of the above. So it was my head was kind of flying all over the place, really.
And I guess that leads me back to something we mentioned earlier, and something that we've asked a lot of pros is when you're working with a manager, how frustrating do you find it when you perhaps don't just get an honest answer? Because obviously most players don't have a problem if they're not the manager's cup of tea, but they just want to know why.
Yeah, I always used to say like Paul Warren would be, a really good manager, not cut out the football side, just purely on how he deals with other human beings, really. he's just straight down the line, tells you. Mick McCarthy was the same. And as a player, that's kind of what you want. You just want someone to tell, like you say, if they're not having you, just tell me, like, give me something, give me a reason. But to not have anything for 6 months, yeah, it's tough. But players go through it all the time, at all different types of levels. And like you say, you just want something from someone. You know what I mean?
As a player, is it almost more important to you than how good a manager is tactically or how much they value you? Just the fact that they're honest with you, is that more important to you normally?
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, you speak to most players. What can they do if the manager doesn't like them? Then he doesn't like them. Like, it's their decision. But the players just want to know themselves. It is rare. Like, most managers don't really communicate in that way. So it can be tough for the players, but that's kind of the way it is.
I know I'm in unfortunate circumstances, but then it led to some loan spells, and one of them in particular became a pretty successful one, where you became a cult hero at Tranmere despite only being there half a year. Obviously, the fan base was huge and the club was on the way back up. But how did you find joining there? Because that second half of the year, they were flying. There were some brilliant, experienced characters in the dressing room. And then it ends with another Wembley appearance and a playoff final victory. How did that sort of emotion turn for you from being frustrated at Preston and going out on loan to different clubs?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, the way it ended, it couldn't have ended any better. Obviously, playing at Wembley and scoring the goal in the last minute and extra time to win the game. But yeah, like I say, I'd had a brief spell at Grimsby before that, so I was buzzing to get higher up the league and fighting for promotion in the playoffs. So yeah, like you say, it was good to go and play games again and get the end result and getting promoted.
Tell me about some of the players in that dressing room, because we've had players on before who have talked about the likes of Steve McNulty, who obviously for me as a Luton fan is a bit of a legend to me as well. But for you, being in a dressing room with players like that, and obviously the keeper, Scott Davis, who was going through the leagues with them, was a bit of a hero. It must have been quite a dressing room to be in from the stories we've heard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I got there late or at a different time, but it was quite subdued, to be honest, to disappoint you. Like, it wasn't... I've definitely been in better dressing rooms, so sorry to disappoint you there. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, it was very serious. Everyone was kind of on the ball, kind of obviously looking to get promoted, which is sometimes why it might not have been what it was in the dressing room. But yeah, everyone was kind of focused, wanted to get promoted, and they were buzzing that we did in the end.
And I've got to ask you, as someone who's been involved in playoff finals, when you're coming up to a game like that at Wembley with thousands more fans than you'd get on a normal weekend, what's that emotion like before for you? Because a lot of players crumble under that pressure. A lot of teams, I mean, we've seen it this week with a League Two playoff final, albeit without the fans. How was it for you in the dressing room before? Are you more nervous than normal? Or for you, is it your element? Are you in your comfort zone then?
Yeah, I think it would have been different if I hadn't have done it before with Rotherham. I knew I was going to be playing at Rotherham in that final, and I knew we had a good chance. So I was buzzing just to get out there, obviously with the fans. And yeah, like you say, the whole set in the stadium, it's unbelievable. So the second time around with Tranmere, I knew I wasn't playing, so I knew I was on the bench.
Yeah.
So yeah, any kind of those feelings just get put to the back of your mind until obviously you have to come on the pitch.
And how does that change for you being a substitute in a game like that? Going from someone who you've got that huge adrenaline rush when you're playing in a final to then being on the sideline, almost just watching as a passenger, and then immediately you're into the action, into one of the fiercest atmospheres that you're probably playing in.
Yeah, it's like you say, it can change really quick. Obviously, I think most people will tell you when you come on as a substitute, it's hard, never mind trying to get your second wind in a normal game, never mind at Wembley when the sun's 30 degrees. But yeah, like you say, 1 minute you're warming up, the next minute you're coming on, but you're buzzing to come on, and then you're in the game trying to impress.
And obviously it ended in heroics for you, and it turned out to be your last game for Tranmere. That summer when you then moved on to Gillingham for this season, was there ever a chance of you staying at Tranmere, or were there other clubs interested, or was it just for you a simple football decision? Because again, you're moving halfway down the country again.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would have liked to stay up north, really. I think there was me and there's a good 3 or 4 players that they'd promised contracts to upon getting promoted. which was certainly the case for myself. And then for whatever reason, that kind of got taken away. So yeah, it was obviously a bit disappointing how it ended, but yeah, I was, like I say, going to Gillingham, it was a step up the league again, obviously with a manager that I knew. So yeah, that worked out okay.
And I guess that probably is a compliment in a way to Steve Evans, that he can't have put you off that much if you went back to work for him again.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he tried to sign me a few times for other teams after Rotherham. So I kind of knew in the back of my mind that it might happen again. So yeah, like you say, it was a long way away, but it was League One football again.
And talk to me about now, obviously the season didn't go as anyone had hoped or expected, it ended prematurely, and obviously now your contract with Gillingham has ended. What are your sort of hopes for the future and for the summer? Because you'll obviously be looking to play at the highest level possible, but as a player gets to the sort of second half of their career, they're then looking at the personal side, being settled. Do you want to keep travelling 200 miles around the country every move? What do you look for this summer when you're talking about moves?
I say that now, but then if something came up, you've obviously got to look at it. But in an ideal world, yeah, I would look to stay in Manchester or travel around to wherever within that nearer than travelling 4.5 to Gillingham. So, but yeah, as I say, that's the job, isn't it? Like each opportunity comes up, you look at it and you see if you can do it or not.
Obviously, we hope you get the move you're looking for and a slightly more local one to make it easier for you. But we finish off, as we always do, with a few quick fire questions, which it'd be rude not to, given your career so far. Talk to me about the favourite player that you've played with and against, or possibly even the best ones you've played with and against.
The best ones that I've played with are Scott Parker, Tom Kearney and Aidan McGeady.
Yeah.
Against, I'd say, I once played against Roy Keane in a reserve game, which wasn't fun in the slightest. So yeah, I'd say him.
That's not a bad list to be able to pick from, to be fair.
Yeah.
What about managers for your career? Because obviously we've mentioned a couple of the ones you've worked under. Who has been your, not even perhaps the best you've worked under, but your favourite or the one that's done the most for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we touched on the success with Steve Evans, who was good for me in terms of I played every week no matter what, which was good for me. But yeah, like I say, I touched on it earlier. I think Nigel Clough for me, obviously to take me 8 leagues above and give me an opportunity like that and play me in the Championship. And not only that, like everyone I spoke to, like enjoyed his training. So yeah, I'd say him, yeah.
And then our final question, which we'll let you have two answers to because you're a pro and a football fan, is we ask players for their favourite game. So for you, we'll let you have one you've been involved in as a player and then one also as a supporter that you weren't directly involved in.
Yeah, I think obviously as a player, the final for Rotherham against Leyton Orient, that's like leagues ahead of any other game that I've played in, to be fair. So I'd say that. And as a Newcastle fan, for being, I think it was 97 when we beat Man United 5-0. Yeah, definitely that was one of the games to remember for me.
A perfect way to end, and obviously a brilliant career so far. We can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and share your footballing story with us. And we hope that you're able to add more successes to the 3 promotions you've already had in your career. So thank you for joining us.
No worries, top man. Cheers for that.